Hi, I'm Jennifer Moore. I'm an attorney with Marcellino and Tyson, and I'm sitting with Matt Marcellino himself. And obviously a attorney with Marcellino and Tyson.
Yeah.
And we just did a podcast on what property is in an equitable distribution claim and in a divorce, what we're looking at in terms of the marital estate, what the property is. So now let's talk about debt. And what that means when we're considering how to divide a marital estate.
Right. So, yeah, debt is everyone's favorite thing to talk about in an equitable distribution scenario. I'm kidding. Nobody wants debt, but you have to deal with it. So in the last podcast, we talked about what was marital property. We talked a lot about assets, 401ks, houses, and so forth. And because that's the tangible stuff. It's an asset, typically has a positive value. Money at the end of the day is really what it comes down to. The other side of that coin is the debt, the negative, that red number.
Right.
So, just like you can acquire a house during the marriage, and therefore that house becomes marital property, you also acquire that mortgage, right, on that property. That mortgage becomes a marital debt. Right?
Yes.
It's the same analysis when you're talking about a house versus a credit card debt, a mortgage, a loan from your parents, whatever it might be. These are marital debts. Now the question becomes, was that debt incurred for, and this is I think really important, for a marital purpose or marital benefit?
Yes.
Right. So because everybody spends differently in a marriage. So credit cards are the easiest example to talk about with this, right? So everyone's got a credit card in the marriage, and some people, they go and spend groceries and clothes and the electric bill or whatever it might be, right? But it's all being spent a little bit differently, maybe not 50-50 the same, but it's all being spent towards the purpose of the marriage, right?
Right.
So that ideally becomes the analysis of, well, okay, what is the marital debt? And it's the date of separation. So one, as long as the credit card was not necessarily open during the course of the marriage, but was used during the course of the marriage for marital purpose, it becomes a marital debt. And then how do we value it, which will be another podcast in a little bit. But just for the purpose of this argument, it's date of separation.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think the important thing to note is that unlike property during the marriage, property that exists at date of separation, the presumption is that that is marital property. Debt is different. Debt that exists at date of separation is presumed to be the separate debt of the person whose name it's in. You have to show that that debt was incurred for the benefit of the marriage. Sometimes that's easier, than others. So like a mortgage on a house that everybody lived in during the marriage, that is very obviously a marital debt, even if just one person's name is on it. But like you just mentioned, credit cards, sometimes that can get a little hairy. It may be just in one person's name, and it may be, at date of separation, a $20,000 balance. And the question is that balance a marital debt, or is it separate debt? And the presumption is that it's separate. So it's the onus is on the person whose name it's in to say, no, I incurred all of that debt to buy groceries and pay our mortgage or pay our utility bill or sign the kids up for camp or whatever. And so then you look at, you can look at those statements. You can go back and look at how that debt was incurred. And, I would say often it is a marital debt because it's clear that it was incurred for the benefit of the marriage. But then sometimes you get those cases where you're surprised to see the charges on the credit card, and it may be to further an affair or further an addiction, or something along those lines. And so that would be an argument that you could have that that's not a marital debt and shouldn't be a part of the division of the estate. That should be solely the responsibility of the party whose name is on the debt.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, like you can, I typically caution clients because in North Carolina, for equitable distribution claims, you can't recover attorney's fees.
Right.
So lawyers were really a sunk cost when it comes to this asset and debt sort of analysis.
Right.
So, we need to be very mindful, really run a cost benefit analysis for our clients. So like if we're talking about a credit card debt of $15,000 is a lot of money, but be thoughtful about how far you want to pay your lawyer to go down that rabbit hole to determine whether it's marital or a separate debt. And to your point, I would say it's not only it's more often than not that these credit cards in this scenario are considered marital. All of it, or the lion's share of it. It's one of the easier presumptions we kind of have, I think, within our practice area, right? Because the presumption is a separate. It's quite easy to overcome that, in my opinion, from my experience. But these are questions that your lawyer should be asking on the front end. It's like, is there any reason to believe that this debt isn't marital? And you explain to them, was anything being spent that wasn't for you or the kids or the marriage, right? The affair, the infidelity, is a prime example.
Right.
Because if husband or wife is out there traveling and doing hotels and gifts for this other person, well, that's clearly not for the marital benefit, right? So like that, those costs need to be carved out entirely from that credit card debt.
Exactly.
And maybe it's a separate credit card that one party didn't know about. Like that's, even though it was, again, incurred during the course of the marriage, it's going to be separate property, right? So you parcel all that out, but again, being thoughtful about how far do you want your lawyer to invest time in that compared to what the cost is.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
It's a tough one.
Listen to your lawyer when they talk themselves out of work.
Yeah.
That's usually for your benefit.
Yeah,
right?
that's actually, that's well put.
Yes.
So like there's also, I mean, here's where I guess kind of, I don't want to say more confusing, but then there's the scenario of like, okay, we have a marital credit card, right? It's in both parties' names and they have multiple credit cards, right? Date of separation, the credit cards all have, let's say there's 3 of them, 10,000 on each, but 2 of them, hers and his, continue to be used after date of separation.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And then which if you've watched our other podcast, you know that those debts incurred after the date of separation would be considered separate property, separate debt. Right? So you're going to get shouldered with that, not your spouse. However, along the way, what are you doing monthly?
To pay it off.
You're making payments.
Yeah.
But what are you paying off? The underlying marital debt?
Right.
Or are you making payments towards your separate debt because you're doing the minimum per month? That's when it gets really difficult to say, like, to ascertain what is the actual value.
Right.
And that just comes with the territory.
Yeah. In a perfect world, we would cut it all off, date of separation, but it never happens that way, and that's why we're here.
Yeah. If you're able to get a new credit card, you should.
Yeah.
To make it really clean.
Make it easy.
But that's not available for everybody.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Another kind of finicky one is student loans. So oftentimes people have student loans.
What do you know about student loans?
Nothing, of course. Just, went through multiple years of school. But, but oftentimes people come to me with student loans, and if they were incurred prior to the marriage, then unfortunately that's the separate debt of whomever incurred them. But if they were incurred during the marriage, then the question is, okay, it might be in your husband's debt or in your husband's name, but did the marriage benefit from that? And so then it's a question of when was it incurred? If you have been married for 30 years, I mean, God forbid you still have student loans from 30 years ago. Maybe I should back it up 20 years. But anyway, if you've been married for a long time and that debt was incurred, that student loan was incurred at the very beginning of your marriage when you're 20s and your husband's getting or you're getting your master's and you've been working in a job that required your master's for the last 20 years, well, then that's a marital debt because the marriage has benefited from you getting your master's and getting that hopefully higher paying job because of your master's. But if it's like in the last year of your marriage, you decided to completely change careers and you took out a $50,000 loan to go to UNC Charlotte to, I don't know, do something totally different, then that is an easier argument that that's your separate debt because the marriage hasn't benefited from that at all.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of like a question of timing.
Timing. Yeah.
Right.
And what
and
was
purpose.
done with that. Yeah. With that degree.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one that pops up fairly frequently.
Yeah. A career change late in the marriage, shortly before date of separation, it's very likely that's going to be separate property.
Yeah.
Because, once you get that degree, and you put that into action within your occupation, you are solely benefiting from it,
right?
Especially after the date of separation,
right?
So I don't know. I've always kind of, in my opinion, I've always kind of considered student loan debt not to be separate property, but the individual who took out the student loans that it's in their name, they should presume that they're going to be, it's going to be distributed to them in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right.
But, that's exactly right. The presumption is it's your separate debt.
Right.
Overcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
But yeah, so like just like in our previous podcast, right? We're talking about a bunch of marital assets. Again, this is the debts associated with equitable distribution, and a lot of it is timing, right? Like we discussed. If the debt existed prior to your date of marriage, it's likely going to be a separate debt. If it was incurred during the marriage, it could very well be a marital debt. Be thoughtful about what you do after your date of separation, especially with credit cards, because you could be on your own when it comes to the increase in those costs. Right?
Yeah, and I'll end with this. I think a lot of people come and they say, okay, he had a separate debt prior to the marriage, but we paid it off during the marriage. I want that money back. And unfortunately, that just doesn't work out. You can't get dollar for dollar credit for paying off a separate debt during the marriage. Maybe it could be considered a distributional factor to increase your 50% to 51% or 52%, but that's a maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough one.
That is a tough one.
Because the debt no longer exists as of date of separation.
Right. So
everything within ED, nearly everything it must still exist as of date of separation.
Right. For you to get some credit back for it.
Right. Yeah. So,
okay.
All right.
So watch our next podcast for how to value marital property and debt.